Tales of the Legion Project podcast, Legionnaires 3. Hey everyone, this is Peter from the Daily Rios podcast.
And this is Eric from the Long Box Review podcast.
And you're listening to the 5th episode of Tales of the Legion Project, a special supplemental podcast to our ongoing Legion Project podcast. In this supplemental episode, we get to go over adjacent material, such as specials and annuals, movies, animated movies, and current issues. And for the first time with this podcast, we are covering our first Legion miniseries.
Woo.
We're going to be talking, not the first Legion miniseries, but our first Legion miniseries as we've started this whole Legion discussion. So we're going to be talking about Legionnaires 3, the 4-issue miniseries from late 1985, early 1986, featuring the characters of Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad. Eric, you excited?
I am. I very much was, because this was a miniseries that I have wanted to read for a very long time. I had decided to get it years ago and collected the issues over a certain amount of time, and just filed them away to get to them eventually, because I had other Legion books ahead of it, not the least of which, of course, is the Baxter run that we're doing on the main Legion project. So I've just been almost salivating in excitement to get to this. And so when Peter, when you suggested we go ahead and cover this on the Tales, I was very excited to do so, and now we get to talk about it.
That's right. And oddly enough, I did not have all 4 issues for the longest time. I only had, I think, issues 2 and 3, maybe 1, 2, and 3, but purchased issue 4, I don't know, in the last 2-3 years. This might be my first time reading the series too, because I was reading going, I don't remember any of this. So maybe I read some of those issues before. I don't think I picked this up off the shelf, but maybe I did. I just don't remember. I didn't go back and look at my notes. I really should. But as a whole, when I was done, it really did feel like this was the first time I read it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is the first time we get to talk about a story or a mini-series pretty much in completion in one episode. So we're just going to see how this goes, because normally we're an issue-by-issue podcast. Now, Eric and I have talked about other stories on your Long Box review. We've done that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But not here on the Legion Project or Tales. So it'll be interesting to see how, like I said, how this all plays out. We're gonna keep to the format, sort of, where we give a synopsis, but we're not going to do issue by issue. We're just going to lay out the whole synopsis of all 4 issues, then get into our main discussion. So we'll see how that goes. And for those of you that are reading along with us, this miniseries was released monthly alongside the Baxter Legion title. This mini fits alongside issues 18 through 22, as I said, at the end of 85 and at the beginning of 86. We just waited until it was done to talk about it, because it just makes more sense than trying to cram it into one of our other episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really connecting the two other than the fact that previous to those issues in those Legion issues, all three founding members have departed from the team,
Right.
essentially. And
Right.
that's pretty much all you need to know.
Yeah. It is fairly standalone in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're kind of familiar with the Legion concept and some of the characters, you could totally read this without knowing where it goes in the main book.
So, Peter, I have a question for you,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we want to get into this as we talk about it, but I'll just put it out there since you just mentioned it. When you were describing the book and which characters were involved here, you said, I believe you said Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and then Lightning Lad. I know you said Lightning Lad last,
Mm-hmm.
even though this was just minutes ago as we're talking here. I don't remember exactly what you said, but I remember you said Lightning Lad last out of those three. So I'm curious, why did you list them in that order?
You know, I do always put Cosmic Boy first
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
because I don't know if as I'm learning as we record these episodes and as I get to dip into the larger Legion history, and that is something I did for this episode too, which we'll talk about later. I get to fill in some gaps, and I get to fill in the stuff that I just don't know about Legion history. But it feels like traditionally, most people have put Cosmic Boy as numero uno,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Mm-hmm. I
Right.
would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other two, the symmetry of putting Saturn Girl in the middle just makes sense to me. So maybe that's an OCD thing. I don't think I put Lightning Lad last for any reason that was even connected to the story. I just know Cosmic Boy's first. Oh, there's Saturn Girl. Got to put her in the middle. And then Lightning Lad.
Well, and if you think about it in terms of their leadership terms through the history of the Legion, that's the same order too, as I recall.
Mm.
So that makes sense.
When artists draw, like when they draw Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, most of the times they stick Wonder Woman in the middle. Like if they're trying to do some kind of like symmetry thing.
Right.
Or they'll put Superman in the middle, And of course, now that I said that, I'm sure if I go look at it, it's, Batman in the middle all the time. Who knows? But I think writing it just kind of makes sense to me. And I have questions about the Trinity that I'll bring up later too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So let's go. Let's jump into Legionnaires 3. Hit us with the synopsis of all these issues, and we'll go from there.
All right. So Legionnaires 3 credits for these issues, and thankfully they're all the same throughout. Keith Giffen did the plot and design with Mindy Newell doing dialogue. Ernie Colon is the penciler, so we get him back again doing some Legion stuff. Carl Kessel is the inker, John Costanza, letterer, Carl Gafford, colorist, and Karen Berger continues as editor. So issue 1, Future Shock. So at some point in time, the Time Trapper contemplates his next scheme against the Legion, in part because, quote, they are different. Fear of me is unknown to them. Now they will know what I am truly capable of. And then he goes to recount the group's origin, just in case people were not already familiar. Later, Cosmic Boy is at the Ranzes watching a game while the Time Trapper's minions try to secretly kidnap Garth and Imra's son, Graham, and the Time Trapper leaves a grave warning. Don't involve the Legion or the child dies. In issue 2, From Hell to Eternity, the Legionnaires 3 hatch a plan to steal Ron Vidar's time cube to travel to some point in the future and retrieve Graham. However, they are captured by the Time Trapper. Issue 3, And Then There Were Two, Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl escape their imprisonment and take a captive of their own, who then leads them to Graham, whom they find sleeping safe and sound. What? And in issue 4, the final issue, the final countdown. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Time Trapper attempts to break Lightning Lad with illusions of the mind in order to force Garth to tell the Trapper what he wants to know. But the Trapper goes too far with at least one illusion, causing Garth to rebel. As Garth starts to attack the Trapper, he appears back at his apartment along with Imra, Rock, and Graham. The issue ends with Time Trapper contemplating his loss, but threatening more games to come. Sorry.
Nicely done.
Uh,
Yeah. As always, even with the Legion project, we're assuming you're reading along with us. So that's why we don't necessarily always go, too in depth in some of our in how we describe these issues, right? Because we want you to play along. And this miniseries is on DC Universe. It is on the DC Universe app. So if you are someone who has the DC Universe app, you can go and read these 4 issues. I didn't check to see if it was on Comixology, but I have to assume it is. Okay, so let's go to our general thoughts of these 4 issues. Do you want to start? You want me to start?
I will. I'll start if you don't mind. So
Go right ahead.
let's see here.
I'm very curious. Very curious to hear.
I know. I was so excited to read this. So in issue 1, we're introduced to what I kind of think of as a new take on the Time Trapper. This is a character now who appears far more dangerous than he has been previously depicted, and it genuinely had me excited to see where this was going. Time Trapper has always been kind of like this, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but he's been this time manipulator type character, but he's always to be fair, most Legion villains are like this. He's kind of easily disposed of by the Legion, so not a real threat. But the way that I'm going to assume that this is really coming from the mind of Giffen. How Giffen is showing us this Time Trapper in issue 1 is just really interesting to me. And then we get the rest of the series. So I'll just say right off the bat, I was disappointed, generally speaking. I felt that the rest, the second and third issue kind of just meanders through, especially the third issue. As I called in my notes, the Rock and Imra Comedy Hour, guest starring Ayla and Aunt Imra, and then ends with issue 4, what should have been this intense examination or unraveling of a man's psyche, but I kind of thought it ended up ultimately, and like I just described, they just kind of show up at their apartment. It just ends up being kind of pointless. So, what was the point of this whole miniseries? Besides maybe setting up the Time Trapper as like the Legion's next big bad. Mm-hmm. So, story-wise, I was really disappointed in this. And whereas I kind of praised Ernie Cologne's art in previous issues of the regular series that he's done, I kind of felt like this was a letdown artistically as well. Hmm. And I'll just, I'll put a button on it with this. It was not, as Minnie Newell, the dialoguist, if that's even a word, wrote in the back of issue number 1, quote, "It was not one of the best Legion stories ever." So I have to disagree with her. So what about you?
Yeah, first read was interesting because I sat down and read it without taking any notes. I said, don't interrupt your reading of it. Just read it and see where you get to by the end. So I read all 4 issues in one sitting and had that same feeling where 1 and 2 seemed fine, and then we got to 3, and I sort of felt I was like, okay, that was 3. Then got to 4, and was thinking, and then when you get to the ending, and it's like the ending is done in 2-3 pages, I was like, ooh, couldn't they have moved some of that stuff that they did in 4 into 3 by shortening some of 3?
Yes.
And then squeeze out the ending a little longer. So I was like, okay. So it was like, you had 1 and 2 got me, then 3 started to slip, and then by 4, it was really the ending that kind of just made me drop off. So I was like, okay, that was my first read. Then I went away from it and I did a second read where I went through and started to do all my notes like I normally do. Gave me a little bit more of an appreciation for number 3 and parts of 4. I still don't like the ending. However, I can kind of see some connections to the earliest issues. Um, I think there definitely is some value. I absolutely agree with you in the whole thing about this is like the Time Trapper revamp, right? Um, and because we're reading all this Legion stuff in chronological order, I don't necessarily really want to think about the Time Trapper after this because I know those stories. I didn't know the stories leading up to this miniseries, so this is definitely a breaking point for that character, a turning point, and I'm going to give the miniseries a little bit of a pass for that. I'm also going to. I think this is also like one of Giffin's earliest serious attempts at writing, right? Like, I think it was in that back issue. So I told Eric, I said back issue 68 has a history of the Time Trapper article, and has a couple other Legion articles where they talk about Legionnaires 3, and I have to assume the companion does as well. Um, and one of the things that the letter column says, Mindy Newell in the letter column, and in this article and somewhere else, they basically Giffen had an idea. When he found out that the Trinity was no longer in the series, he had an idea of something he wanted to do.
Peter, did he tell anybody what that idea was?
I mean, I don't think we got that, but I think this is like an early attempt for Giffen, right? Because there are things that I do see here that kind of feel familiar, and especially when you think about he's working with a dialogue person. If you think about like the Justice League era, the Bwahaha era, where it was Giffen and DeMatteis was one was a plotter, or they were both plotters, and one was a scripter, etc. I kind of get the sense that maybe what worked with Levitz and Mindy Newell maybe didn't work as well in this uh, team up, you know. So one thing I as I'm reading it, I'm going, yeah, this feels like what comics and DC, what they were trying to do at the end of Crisis, when they were trying to maybe do stories that weren't necessarily always about the superheroics, because as these issues came out, the Crisis was just finishing up. So the whole DC universe is in this weird sort of limbo place, right? I do think it speaks to the popularity of the Legion that a miniseries did come out. I think they were testing the waters. It had been some time since the Secrets of the Legion of Superheroes, or whatever that miniseries was. We would get Cosmic Boy after this, so I kind of dig that. I dig that it's like one of their most popular books at the time, branching out into this miniseries. It is flawed. It is definitely flawed. I actually like the art. I think it's right in line with a lot of what Ernie Colon likes to do. I think for me, it's what's odd about it is that he's dealing with the future, and it's not like a fantasy book or a sword and sorcery book, which is a place where he really excels. But there's a lot of stuff I actually like about the art, and there's humor. There's that Giffen humor that's here that maybe Mindy Newell didn't translate as well. So I'm definitely on the fence with this as well. It is not the greatest Legion story. It is an interesting story. I think there's some stuff in it that I walked away with going, okay, I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that. Okay, yeah, I think that was a lot.
Well, I'll just tag on to something that you just said. I too appreciate the fact that the powers that be at DC at the time, allowed Giffen and company to go ahead and do what on the surface, or at least from just a very basic concept level, is a very personal story of these three old friends dealing with this situation. You can't get any more mundane, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but mundane story of a child that's been kidnapped, right? And it just so happens that they're Legionnaires and they have superpowers, and it's 1,000 years in the future. But it's very much that. But I just got the sense that Giffen, while he may have had this really cool idea, it seemed like he just bit off more than he could chew, or at least more than the other people could help with. And I can't understand why Karen Berger didn't do something more with this as the editor, to try and steer it one way or the other. Who knows? Maybe she did, but and this is what we got. And with monthly publishing, it could be that they just ran out of time to do certain parts of this, and this is the best they could do within the time frame that they had. So, and like you, I feel like there were some interesting concepts in here, some gems to look over and to contemplate. So that's really what I tried to focus on are those things, and less on my nitpickiness of the story in general. So I'm looking forward to what you have to say about these things too.
And I even think that some of the creators, like Giffen, probably would look back. I mean, he is smart enough that he probably would look back in this and go, I don't know what I wanted. I just I wanted some visuals, because he is a visual writer,
yeah,
right? Like Ernie Cologne talks about, there were I don't know if we want to call them layouts. Maybe it was more like thumbnails. Like I'm pretty sure Giffen talked about when he was doing the weekly 52 series. He would do layouts, but they were not comic book size. They were like almost index card size, mm-hmm. or somewhere around there. So Ernie Cologne was asked, did you follow them? And he said, I not always. And I let me see. I have the direct quote from. I think it's from that same article. I can't remember. Did you follow Giffen's, I'm going to call them thumbnails, religiously? Ernie Cologne says, no. The reason I did it is because he's the kind of storyteller where he doesn't like figures jumping out of panels and stuff like that. He really likes straight ahead, panel by panel storytelling. And at that point, I wanted to follow his stuff because I liked that. I still think it's the best way to tell these kind of stories. I'm not that fond of the very imaginative panel layouts. So maybe he followed it, maybe he didn't, but he understood what I guess Giffen was trying to go for. And it just, maybe it just didn't work. Maybe the whole sequential marriage didn't quite work, didn't quite connect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what was funny was I kind of was going back and thinking about our discussions about the ending of the Eye for an Eye storyline in the Baxter run, issues 1 through 5. And we got to the ending, and there's that scene as Karate Kid is laying on a funeral pyre or something like that. One of the guards in the palace, in Projector's palace, he just turns to another and he's like, what the hell was all that killing for? And the other guy said something like, I don't know, whatever that ending was. You remember that ending?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it did kind of feel like, yeah, I remember there was some question. I don't know if it was from you or from listeners or just in general, like, what was the larger plan of the Legion of Supervillains? Why did Nemesis have a goal, but yet other members of the team had a goal? And it really, by the end of it, certain characters got affected, and the larger Legion concept got it's like someone got a hold of the concept and started to shake it right out of its complacency. Um, and there were some lasting effects that happened afterwards. And oddly enough, there's some of that going on here too, right? Like the master time trapper's master plan, he knows what it is. Maybe Giffen and Newell know what it is. It doesn't translate so well. However, I think there are some things that as I kind of went through the dialogue, I went, oh, okay, you know what? You can sort of connect this from issue 1 to that to issue 4. But it leaves us in this very Chris Claremontian, Paul Levitz ending of, yeah, okay, well, here we go.
Yeah.
Something else might happen, or maybe not. But here's where we are at the ending, because when you were talking about the whole mundaneness of this, there's a lot of stuff: watching football, getting groceries, hiring a nanny for the kidnapped kid. It's a superhero story told through the relationship of a family. There's a lot of kind of like Fantastic Four stuff going on here. And that's not something that DC kind of plays around with, especially not in the 80s. Or at least, I should say maybe they were starting to in the 80s. So I think that could also be why maybe it feels unfinished, because life is unfinished to get to whatever, Purple Prosy,
Yeah, but is that something that we want in our 4-issue miniseries?
No.
Yeah.
No. No, and I don't know what their thoughts were in terms of going after it. And I don't really want to like kind of talk about what happens after this, because we'll get to it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then that way we can work backwards, if we can go, oh, see, okay. But you're right, but it is a larger universe, the Legion universe. And it does feel like there might be some kind of plan, but it's just kind of unfortunate that it ended this way.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I'm not going to try to defend the ending. I get it. So let's talk about the covers.
Okay.
Let's move away from a little bit. I love the covers. I think they're 1 through 3 are basically telling the same story, but in different ways. It's always Time Trapper versus the Trinity, right? You got the first one, which is very confrontational. You got the second one, which is the chess match. And you got the third one where they're swimming in the hourglass, right? It's always like some kind of confrontation or some kind of situation they have to get out of. And then issue 4 is the only solo cover. And I've always been a fan of 1 or 2 figures against a white background on a cover, because I think it really stands out.
Oh, yeah.
And I love, and this is me putting this on it, I love how the Time Trapper seems to be getting bigger and bigger, even to the point that you could kind of say that Lightning Lad is standing inside his face, though the face is white, not black. Like if you look at the hood from issue 1 to 2 to 3, it just seems to kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. So in my mind, I see issue 4 as it being like he's standing inside the hood, which could have been really cool if it was against a black background. But so I'm a fan of the covers. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on issue 4. I mean that stark contrast. It's not something that we see a lot. At least I don't think we have. Somebody made a comment. I don't remember if it's in the stuff that I solicited on Twitter, if I read this somewhere now, I'm forgetting, but nowadays you would get, I think the person said that nowadays, for this white cover, that would be the variant cover that you'd have to hunt for. But it was nice that they gave us this thing for free, essentially. But yeah, I noticed that too, like the Trapper growing in prominence on the covers. There's actually an element in the issues at the end of each issue that corresponds to the subsequent cover, which I thought was kind of neat. They didn't do it every issue, but there for 2 or 3 issues they did. So I thought that was a neat way to transition from one issue to the next. And I think I had a similar thought to you as far as what you said about Lightning Lad within the Time Trapper's face. And I think there's even something in issue 4 that I in my notes that says something like that within the pages themselves. But yeah, that was a cool idea. But yeah, they're okay. They're not not my favorite. There's they're really kind of tropey, especially issues 2 and 3. With how many times do we see people as chess pieces in comic books, and then that old shtick of someone being trapped in a giant hourglass. We've seen that since the Golden Age, I'm sure. But
Yeah, 3's my favorite. I actually like that one. I like that one a lot, the whole hourglass thing. I don't know why. Look, my favorite color is purple, and it's smacked all over the place.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
I probably gravitate to a lot of it because of that. It's another purple time traveler, just like Kang over at the Marvel Universe. Like, I'm there for it.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, that was Chris. That was Charlton Hero who mentioned the whole, in his email to us that we'll read at the end of the episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about that. Cover number 4. Number 3 is, like I said, probably my favorite. No, I think they're fine. They're not in my top 25 favorite covers, but they're decent. They talk. You can kind of tell what's happening in the issue from it, and I love that connection you made of the last, because I just looked at it. Yeah, you're right. The last page of issue 1, it connects to the cover of issue 2, and the same thing 2 to 3. So. That's cool. That's cool. I wonder if that was a design. I don't know.
I like to think that it was a design, but I also kind of think what maybe it was maybe happenstance. I don't know, just the way that this whole thing just kind of came together. What's the phrase I want to use here? Just kind of developed over a period of time. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's Ernie Colon doing the cover, so you have to think maybe he's being smart about it.
Yeah, I would like to think that.
Yeah. All right, so the main discussion of this mini-series. I have a couple points I want to throw out at you, unless there's anything you want to start with.
No, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things I think they should have done that might have helped is I feel like the text page in issue 2 should have gone in issue 1, because it starts off with really like the theme of the whole thing, right? So this is Mindy Newell doing the text pages, and it says Legionnaires 3 is a lesson in heroism. It is a story of love and sacrifice, of the love between family and friends, and of the sacrifices that love can drive us to commit. It is a tale of courage, honor, and heart. Courage, honor, and heart. So when I read that in the second issue, I immediately, like I said, thought, oh, that should have been in the first issue. That kind of really speaks to, it just puts me as a reader in a whole other place, right? That I'm reading this story not through the superhero lens, but through this mother, father, friends, family, colleagues, whatever you want to call them. Because a lot of the situations that they get into, especially in that first issue, it's not very super heroic to climb out of a window, right? And just sort of run through the streets and get groceries, as we said. And well, I guess that's part of that's in the second issue, right? Just have the conversations that they're having, that they're, don't wake the baby. Again, like I brought up the Fantastic Four, it felt like a Kirby Lee Fantastic Four comic,
mm-hmm.
where they're like, don't wake Franklin, and Johnny and Ben are roughhousing in the other room. So I like that. I when I was reading it through the second time, I tried to keep that in my brain, this whole thing about courage, honor, and heart, a story of love, family, and all that. So you're more familiar with a lot of like the Trinity, the earlier Legion comics from what I read. When you think of the Trinity, when you think of these three characters, Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad, does it work? You know, I mean, the title is called Legionnaires 3. Did that part work for you? I have some thoughts on maybe some characterizations that I thought were off here and there, but what about the Trinity? Let's start there. What worked for you? What didn't work?
Generally speaking, it didn't work for me at all. It at the very beginning, we get them together as a family unit of a sort, and that all works. I mean, that whole bit before the incident, before Graham is kidnapped, that felt like the three of them. You know, the three musketeers, the three amigos. You know, whatever. You know, these are three characters who have been together since the beginning. They have gone through all these trials and tribulations, and they've gotten older and grown together. Two of them have gotten married and had a child. You know, they've just been through so much, and you kind of get a sense of that. They're very familiar with each other. They're very comfortable with each other, which all that I loved. I loved it. But then once the adventure starts going, and they get captured, you know, then the Trinity is torn apart, right? And it very much becomes Cosmic Boy and Imra, Saturn Girl, on their little adventure trying to get to Lightning Lad, and Lightning Lad's dealing with all this psychological trauma that the Time Trappers imposing upon him. And then we get them together at the very end, but then it ends. So there's no real circling back to that whole idea, that whole concept of the three of them together and how they deal with things. And there's no way, there's nothing that we're shown where they're processing this. There's a little bit from Cosmic Boy's point of view in issue, was it 3? Yeah, I think it was issue 3. But then, you know, they quickly move on to the plot of that issue. So we don't really get to, I don't think we can really get the full effect of what that really means. Certainly not to Cosmic Boy, and certainly not to the rest of the three. So I don't know. What are you thinking on that in those terms?
I saw some stuff there. I feel like this might be me putting it on the books, and it may not be what they were trying to go for. And you know, I do this game a lot, but you know, when you have a book called Legionnaires 3 and you have these three characters, there's a lot of ways that you could write a story, right? You could either write about them as a unit, as you mentioned. You could also write about them individually, and then you could also write them in pairs, right? Because when you have like an issue 3, which I agree with you, I thought there was a lot of cool Cosmic Boy stuff in issue 3. You have Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl in prison, and Lightning Lad is off somewhere else. So it's Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl as a pair, going after their third person, right? You could flip it the other way when they're in the very few moments we get between Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl dealing with the missing child, and then Cosmic Boy has to be the one that's kind of off to the side in that kind of situation. So you don't get a lot of them as a trio, except for like the first 2 issues. But as I was reading, I was going, oh, okay, so there's Cosmic Boy in issue 3. Lightning Lad is clearly issue 4's focus. So I went back and thought, because this was the second time I was reading it, and I only really picked it up when I got to issue 3, and I thought, okay, does that mean that Saturn Girl's the focus in issue 2? Sorta, but not really. And I wish they would have done that. I wish they would have done, here's the 3 of them in issue 1, here's the focus individually in each of the other issues. Now 4 is clearly Lightning Lad.
Mm-hmm.
And let me start there, because he gets a whole spotlight. Like, they go through all of his trials and tribulations. I guess it's right? Like that feels part of the course of what Lightning Lad's life has been like to this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the whole, I didn't realize the big green monster on that one splash page in 4 was the whole reason why he lost his arm. Like I've never read that story. So um, there's a lot about his, like issue 4 opens up with him trying to find a job, but the one job wants to leverage his position as a Legionnaire for the job, right? The other job doesn't want him around because the insurance is going to be too high, or the maybe the other employees might some villain might attack, and then that's it. And then when he walks out, who's there but Starfinger, right? Almost to like play that point. Then he goes home, and this is all happening in his in this state of torture that Time Trapper is putting him through, and Imra's going after him and then leaves. So there's this like psychological torture thing going on, which is not very comic booky. It's also, it's not so far removed from some of those Silver Age Legion stories that we used to get where they just sort of randomly walked into a place. I mean, we read a story, what was the one annual, the Curse annual, where Lightning Lad was getting a checkup, and wasn't it Starfinger or somebody was trying to mind wipe him, right? Like it was just, so it's not terribly far off. So, but as the hard luck hero, that made sense. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And I even think the way that the Time Trapper is trying to go through Lightning Lad, if you go back to issue 1 where he says, why am I driven to play these games? I must not let emotion rule. I should be thankful that the Legion exists. There is little enough that amuses me. And then in issue 4, he's talking to Lightning Lad. He goes, I will break you and I release the madness inside of you. And all of this was to learn Legion secrets. This is the part where I think we both are kind of like, well, what's the point? But yeah. I kind of feel like he's using Lightning Lad as a test, right? He feels like out of the 3 of them, that's the weakest one. So
Sure.
Let me test this weakest one. Because if I can break through him, then I can break through the Legion. So ultimately, I don't think Giffen and Company's point was to go to the next step. I think it really was just to test this one step. And Lightning Lad just proved to not fall for it and not succumb to it, I should say, by the end of issue 4. So I think that's right? Like, we don't want to see our heroes lose. But I also thought when they got to the end where they were like, oh, well, we won, and one of them, Saturn Girl or Lightning Lad's like, well, did we? Did we really win? And I don't think that necessarily means that it's going to continue into another story, but I do think it puts a little doubt. Not that we may or may not get that any more of that after this, but so Lightning Lad felt kind of right. Like, he was the one that was always trying to fight everybody, and he was he always came across as kind of brash to me, headstrong, a little wild. I mean, they called him Livewire, in the reboot. That's so that kind of part worked for me. So yeah. I don't know. What do you have anything for Lightning Lad in that regard?
Well, so I was just thinking in the way that you're describing Lightning Lad that, and this occurred to me too when I was reading this. In terms of Lightning Lad being the focal point, the focal point of the torture or the trying to break down a Legionnaire, especially of those 3, he makes total sense for Time Trapper, and it really reminded me of some early to me Legion comics that as I was getting into the Legion. This was in I want to say the 270s of their book or so. And there's one point where, and this is during Lightning Lad's tenure as leader, where all this stuff is going on, and he finally has enough, and he just basically yells at everybody and says he quits. and that, to me, that for some reason that epitomizes what Garth is like. It's like, he tries to maintain this level of cool and be the leader that I think he thinks he should be, especially in comparison to his two best friends in the Legion, who, Rock has always been portrayed as kind of leadership material. I mean, he was. I forget now. I think maybe he was chosen by the computer out of the three to be the first leader because he was the most qualified to, in whatever way the computer was programmed to evaluate that. And then Imra had, I think, a long tenure as leader in the Silver Age. So Garth is trying to live up to those expectations he's built up, and he can never quite get there. And part of that is, to me, he has gone through all this tragedy. You mentioned the fact the monster that chewed off his arm, and then he died. And where do you go from there after you've suffered through those things? And then now you're dealing with the fact that someone has kidnapped your only child and trying to break you down. So all that just makes sense to me. I really like that. The idea of what they're trying to do with Lightning Lad here, it makes sense. In fact, I also, I forgot to mention this. I was going to do that. I was trying. Okay, let me back up. There's so many thoughts.
I'm with you.
So keep coming back to, why is he doing this? Why is Trapper doing this to Lightning Lad? I mean, on one hand, like I said, it makes sense. It totally makes sense why he's picking on Garth, because he's the weaker one. But is there something else to it? And I kept trying to find some sort of connection, some specific connections in the past. And you had provided me that list of Time Trapper appearances throughout time in the Legion comics. And there's this one story that I read. It's from Adventure Comics 321. Is that right? Yeah. Because this is the one with the concentrator, the secret of the concentrator. And so the Time Trapper is trying to find out the secret of this concentrator thing. And that's very similar to what we have here. And in that story, lo and behold, who is the person who supposedly breaks down and reveals the secret? It's Lightning Lad. Only in the end, as always, he outwitted the Time Trapper. So I thought, well, maybe this is why Time Trapper is going after Garth, because he's getting a little bit of revenge on the guy who tricked him. But did Time Trapper learn nothing? I mean, Garth won out in the end in that one. So anyway, it's just all a jumbled mess for me. And I feel like now, as I'm talking, I'm kind of reflecting that jumbled mess. So I'm going to stop now.
I mean, yeah, we're sort of. I felt the same way. I get lost in my thoughts a lot of times. I found another quote in issue 1. I wanted to say this earlier too. This is issue 1, page 10. The Trapper says, "When he'll be able to destroy the Legion, for when the curtain falls for good, your facade, meaning Lightning Lad, will fall with it. Then you will gladly offer the Legion's secrets to me." So, in a way, again, that is what happened. That's what Trapper wanted to happen, but it didn't. So if his goal right now for this miniseries was to break Lightning Lad, it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So plot-wise, that's right. Like, and I think what for us, I think what's frustrating is he keeps saying he wants these secrets, but we never know what those secrets are. But that's not the point.
Yes, but I can only accept the MacGuffin for so long. It's got to mean something. So what is that thing? But yeah, I get it. I see where you're going with that.
It's a second concentrator, and then we get that wacky ending to that story. Then, because it's also now here's where I'll ride along with you, because a couple pages before in issue 1, the Trapper hints that he talks about the Legion's ultimate destiny. And he says it was recorded once, but it's long since lost to time. And I think he even says, I could go find out what that is, but I'm not going to. I thought that was also kind of cool too. Like, because this is a game, right? We don't get chess pieces. And in the very last page of the book, of the miniseries, which I had to like look at and think about. I was like, what the hell am I looking at? He's holding the king piece in his hand
Mm-hmm.
as he's looking out the window. The very last splash page of issue 4, when they're like, "Up, the game's over." He has the king in his hand, and this was a game. Just like in chess, you have those little time markers that you hit. He has an hourglass, and he's only going to play it until the hourglass is over. Because, as I said before, he doesn't even know. Why am I, curse you fates? Why am I driven to play these games? It again, as we said before, Giffen wanted to say something. It's kind of there. It's a little jumbled and convoluted. You can scratch away at it and you can make excuses for it, as I'm doing. But I got there. I can see it. Doesn't make it any better, but I can see it.
Exactly. If there's no stakes, then what was the point?
Oh, but that's the thing. He's the time trapper. There are no stakes. Okay, let's move away from Lightning Lad. Let's go to Cosmic. Oh wait, no. So in the text pages, when they said those 3 words, courage, honor, and heart, I was having a hard time putting Lightning Lad somewhere. I kind of think of it as honor, like he's honor, because there's pride in honor. Like I think of like Worf and the Klingons and how their honor always gets them in trouble. And, do you live up to it? Like I think on one hand you could say he's reacting from his heart a lot, but I don't know. Which one of those 3 words would you say is Lightning Lad?
Oh, I agree with you. I especially when you get to the 4th issue, and he essentially upholds the honor of being a Legionnaire by not revealing anything to the Time Trapper. Now, I think that's messy and a bit muddied because he's really reacting from a very personal standpoint, as opposed to something as or connected to him as a Legionnaire. But I can see it. Yeah. I really think of him as the honor part of this, and obviously Rock is courage to me, and Imra is heart. But then I also, this is maybe a bit of a meandering on my part, but is that just me being stereotypical male perspective? That the woman is the heart of the group. I don't know.
I actually flipped them. I gave heart to Cosmic Boy.
Ooh. And courage, okay,
to Saturn Girl.
Yeah.
And the whole reason I only read the first part of that text page because later on they talk about the first appearance of the Legion, and they were testing Superboy, and they were testing him for these, for courage, honor, and heart. But he had everything, right? So he sort of exemplified everything and more. So it wasn't just that he had one of those; he had all of them plus. So all of these characters obviously have all 3 of them, but I just thought it was a fun game to walk away and go, okay, well, which one, could you throw at? I think there's something like if we move to Cosmic Boy, this is where I really felt like the individual nature of this title kind of was solid, because he has a lot of thoughts in issue 3 about his place, about where he grew up, being poor. He met these friends. He says about Saturn Girl that most people were in awe of her except for Lightning Lad and me, and you even get the hint, the suggestion that because Lightning Lad went after her first, that's the reason why they were a couple, that maybe Cosmic Boy could have also tried it, but he was just so glad to have friends. I also really love, I love his back and forth with Saturn Girl. Like, obviously it's there with Lightning Lad, but it's also there with Saturn Girl, where they crack jokes at each other. His exploration of powers was kind of fun, when he was building that huge rock to break out of the prison or to create a distraction or whatever it was. That was kind of fun to see. So I feel like I felt like his characterization was pretty spot on too. He was a little in the background here and there. I don't know. I kind of wanted a little bit more of the leader to come out. But what did you think of Cosmic Boy?
Yeah, I pretty much felt the same way. Cosmic Boy is one of my favorite Legionnaires anyway, so I always want to see more of him, and I'm always disappointed because they always seem to they show him a little bit and then they quickly move away from him. But granted, we have 20 some characters, so I totally understand why they do that. But yeah, I guess I don't really have much more to say about that. Because you pretty well described how I was thinking about it anyway.
Okay.
But there was something you said about Cosmic Boy, and I was thinking, in contrast with Saturn Girl, and I've lost my thoughts, so you might have to cut that, Peter. Sorry.
Was it the powers thing, or was it the leadership thing?
Well, so all three of them, I thought, speaking of the powers thing, all three of them had a bit of a chance to show off their abilities. Mostly Saturn Girl uses her powers in anger, which I thought was interesting, and in a very painful way to the victims, in which she's unleashing her abilities. And Lightning Lad does a little thing, I think, in issue 2, where he zaps some people from around the corner. I thought that was kind of cool. And then you see, as you mentioned, Rock doing his thing, but he gets to do it a couple times as well in this.
He creates that monster out of scrap metal.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
that was really cool. I didn't make note of that too. It's like, wow, they're really stretching what Rock can do in this. But then it doesn't. It's just they're just nice little bits of power exploration, but it didn't really have a huge impact in the story itself, or I think maybe even later in later stories with the character.
Yeah, I mean, we've been getting that in the Baxter run, too.
Yeah.
Like, Levitt's really extrapolating some of the abilities of these characters. Mm-hmm. So I actually really appreciate that. And I think it is part of the story, right? Like, it's, when you put yourself in tragedy, you learn about yourself. And I think that is kind of meant to be part of the story, I hope,
Well, and speaking of that, I'm going to touch on Saturn Girl here. How interesting was it that she turned inward? I mean, to an extreme sense at the beginning of issue 3, where she's essentially catatonic. It appears anyway. She's not conversing with Cosmic Boy until a couple pages in.
Right.
She seems just out of it. Like she's not even hearing Rock when he's talking to her. I mean, he even talks about that, or thinks about it, or even says it. I don't know which offhand, but and because we're so used to seeing Saturn Girl as kind of like the strong female character of the group. As I said, she used to lead the Legion. She's you could consider her the matriarch of the Legion, even after having left the team. Her presence looms large in the book, I think. And to see her portrayed in this way is interesting. I think even Mindy Newell, I'm going to see if I can find that quote that I pulled out. In issue, she's talking, this is out of the Legion Companion that I found this. Mindy Newell was talking about that scene in issue 1 where Graham is taken, and originally what she got from Giffen was her being kind of like what she calls the Iron Butterfly, the really strong character, but her take on this was, and this is a quote from her: "I don't care how strong a person you are, if your kid is kidnapped, you're going to be a mess. So I did rewrite that scene and everybody loved it." And so I thought that was that provided some nice context for what we see on the page here. Speaking as a parent, I can totally relate to the sense of dread and worry that I imagine that she's going through. If my kid was kidnapped, I'd be a mess. And the fact that she's not a mess, I mean, she's holding it together. She's not, your your soap opera-esque female character who falls apart and needs a man to help her through things. That's not Imra at all. But she is going through this tragedy, and right now she's going, at least at the point in issue 3, she's going through it alone. She doesn't have her husband there to lean on and to help her through what she's feeling, and for her to help him through what he's going through. But curiously, she has the next best thing. One of her best friends, one of her longest companions in the Legion, and yet she's not, I guess, taking advantage of that or relying on Rock in any way. She totally turns inward, and to me that's a very interesting reaction from her, I guess.
But she does say later, which is, I think, doubly interesting, where she says, I was just waiting for you to get off your ass and do something.
That's true.
Right? So it actually is very much in her character. Like
for her to say something like that? Yeah.
Maybe not so much to just sit there and not just sort of say, Cosmic Boy, do something, but she just let him figure it out, as sometimes you have to let friends do, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I did like that. She came across a little Sue Storm-ish to me. Oh, yeah. A bunch of times. Which I think
like early Sue Storm.
Yeah. And I think people who were writing letters at the time, they were kind of feeling the same way. And Mindy Newell was kind of countering it, going, saying the things that you said. And I don't know. I sort of flip flop both ways. I sort of see what she's saying, but I also feel like Saturn Girl wasn't utilized a lot in some of those early issues. One of the if we jump to Saturn Girl, where is it? I think it's in issue 3, or maybe it's in issue 4, where she says, "Look, I've kind of come to terms. If that means, here it is. It's issue 3, page 5. Saturn Girl, she accepted the possibility that Graham. She doesn't really say it this way, but that Graham could be dead." But then she goes, but if Garth is too, and then she doesn't finish that thought. And I was like, whoa. She could come to terms if something happens to her child, but not if she also loses Garth. Like, I guess maybe the point is that she loses her whole family, but in my mind, I thought she's picking the man over the baby. I was like, whoa.
Well,
that was
interesting. Yeah. I kind of read that as, that we didn't talk about it specifically, but at the end of issue 1, or near the end of issue 1, and I mentioned in the synopsis, but Graham is kidnapped. They think they have gotten him back just very briefly, but then we get that splash page where it's this creepy looking doll, which is swaddled in this blanket with this message from the Time Trapper, basically saying, only you 3 are allowed to play this game, and if you bring anybody else in, I'm gonna kill the kid. So I kind of took what Imra said as she already thinks that the Time Trapper is done away with her kid, or at least she's holding out hope that he hasn't. But she's so pragmatic that she is already entertaining the thought that they've already lost that part of their lives. And when they, until this point in issue 3 that you were mentioning, they were all 3 together. She had Garth. They were together. So that really wasn't something she had contemplated until just that moment.
Okay, that makes sense. More of a unit as opposed to picking one of Imra's choice, right? It's not Sophie's choice. So. Yeah, so yeah, I think we're kind of saying the same thing. Saturn, the way Saturn Girl was, as opposed to the other. Her characterization kind of fluctuated for me.
Yeah,
you could say.
And she definitely suffers in this series in terms of the level of importance or the level of engagement in the plot, overall plot. So that was kind of disappointing, considering that it is the Trinity and it is called Legionnaires 3. I would have liked more of a balance with her.
Right. Okay, so that's the Trinity side of things. That's the Legionnaires 3. So let's talk about the villain, the Time Trapper. I think you mentioned that you liked sort of this portrayal. This is a new portrayal. How much of the Time Trapper stuff have you read before I sent like that compilation thing?
I definitely hadn't read, I don't think, any of the Adventure Comics era. There were some Time Trapper stuff that I read from like the late 70s, I think, or somewhere in the 70s. Just here and there. Mm-hmm. But not, but it's funny because I could not tell you before we started getting into this, and I was doing all this reading based on the list you gave me. I couldn't really remember any major story involving the Time Trapper.
Did you read the wedding issue of Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad?
See, that's the funny thing. I've only read that within the last year.
Okay,
because I got one of the Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes hardcover collections, and that was reprinted in that because I never could find the what do you call those, the large size
treasury,
yeah. I never was able to find that one, so that's a relatively recent story for me. So yeah, it's really weird because I have this very clear memory of reading the Great Darkness Saga, and when Darkseid, was it Darkseid or one of his minions? I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
Basically steals the power from the Time Trapper in that story, and then I think that's when I discovered that the Time Trapper was a controller, because I think that was first revealed in that wedding issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I hadn't read that, and so I was like, "What?" Because I knew the controller connection to the Legion, having read a bunch of reprint issues over the years. But so yeah, it was like, okay, I knew of the Time Trapper, I guess, and I remember reading that story, or his appearance in the Great Darkness Saga. So yeah, it's very bizarre. So now, 5 years later or something like that, and having read all that stuff from the 5 years later, especially, it's all pardon me for using this other franchise's phrase, terminology or whatever. It's all very timey-wimey in my mind, with the Time Trapper, which I think is actually kind of cool. Because it's just all a jumbled mess. But in this way, it's just like this weird thing where I have this sense of the Time Trapper being very important in the Legion, and yet when I go back and actually think about which stories I read, I don't understand why I think that.
I think that's true of a lot of these Legion villains. Like, their reputation sometimes is bigger than the stories that they actually first appeared in or that they subsequently appeared in. And it's not until maybe the 70s and 80s and after that you really get like that slam bang story with them. Right? Like we talked about Universo in our last Legion of Superhero, in our last Legion Project episode. The first appearance of Universo, he's there in the first couple pages, he's there in the last couple pages, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And he has very little appearances after that. So this whole Time Trapper reputation is kind of the same thing. So I went on one of my, as I am conditioned to do, I said, you know what? I'm going to read every Time Trapper appearance before this miniseries. And that's exactly what I did. I went back to the very beginning. I compiled a whole bunch of notes, and I said, I want to see this maniac from the beginning. I want to see how he how he develops, because clearly we're getting a new version here, and a good version, the beginnings of a great version, probably.
Yeah.
And I realized, I think the first time I read Time Trapper was not until maybe the Cosmic Boy miniseries, in chronological order, not in back issue reading. So anyway, so I went through and did a Time Trapper list, and I'm actually going to start with an Edmund Hamilton short story from 1936. Edmund Hamilton was a Legion writer. He is the person who first introduced the Time Trapper into the Legion lore. And there's this very interesting short story. It's about 10 pages long, maybe. From Weird Tales, Volume 27, Issue number 3, cover date of March of 36. It's called In the World's Dusk. And it's billed as a gripping tale of the last survivor of the human race and his attempts to repopulate the world. The character's name is Gallows Gan. There's a couple of descriptions here that are going to jump out at you. One of the descriptions is, he strode with his robes swirling about him. And then there's this talk of 100 high square panels that bore in painted pictures the story of mankind all throughout time. So basically, he is the last man on Earth. And he's bored. And humanity has given up on having children. And he says here, there are no living men and women in the world today, but what of the trillions of men and women who have existed on Earth in the past? Those trillions are separated from me by the abyss of time. Yet if I could somehow reach across the abyss, I could draw many living people out of the past. So this character that he created, this story that he created, it's the Time Trapper. They talk about his base. It's this, let me look it up. So he lives in the city of Zor, and he lives in this like citadel, this very dark black, almost like this black citadel. And when you look at like the Time Trapper's first appearance, where he actually is in one of the Legion stories, it's the same sort of thing. It's like this building that kind of looks like it was designed to be in Wakanda. It almost looks like a Black Panther standing in like rubble. Of like this future time, like that's from like Adventure Comics 321, and then think about Legionnaires 3. We got this kind of like tall tower, right, in the middle of all this decay, and when Mike Grell drew it in some of his stories, it was just, again, this very tall tower in the middle of sand, nothing but sand, because everything had corroded. So all of these elements are in this short story. It's a great short story. He brings these people from another time, but all he can do is bring their bodies. Their minds don't come with them, so they're all kind of like zombies almost. And in the Time Trapper's real first appearance in the Legion stories, that's the same thing that happens. Like there's just these people that are just kind of like walking around like dummies, you know? And all of these connections just kind of make sense when you go back and read this story. So you can kind of find this on some archival sites. If you look up Weird Tales, Volume 27, Issue 3, because this very much is the proto-matter for Time Trapper. Okay, so I'll be a little quicker as we go through. The next time we get a very Time Trapper character is in Wonder Woman 101 from 1958. It's a character named the Time Master. And he lives in a funhouse mirror, one of those funhouse of mirror places at a park, at a festival. And he's just basically sending Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor through time, and then at the end he disappears. Okay, so he's not called Time Trapper, but we'll get back to that in a bit. All right, so now we go to Adventure Comics 317, 1964. It's the first appearance of Dream Girl and the first mention of the Time Trapper as written by Edmund Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because Superboy and Mon-El are just basically talking about following up on an untold case of Cosmic Boy and Sun Boy, who tried to follow the Time Trapper a scientific criminal into the future, but their time bubble was stopped 30 days into the future. So now we get this time barrier, which will be called the Iron Curtain of Time. And it stops them from going just 30 days into the future. So at this point, it's not even the end of time. And Superboy says, what's the time trapper doing in the future that he doesn't want us to see? So then Saturn Girl in a new time bubble and Mon-El, again, they try to break the Iron Curtain of Time, but it doesn't happen. And then we get this coming soon that says, a duel between the Legionnaires and the Time Trapper. So Edmund Hamilton is really just kind of like building this character. Adventure Comics 318 we get a cameo appearance of a character in a hood, and it's all just because, again, written by Edmund Hamilton. Some of the characters are, again, trying to break this Iron Curtain of Time, and he's just there in shadows, just laughing at them. Adventure Comics 321, 19th June of 64, cover date June of 64. This is the first real appearance of the Time Trapper in the story. This is the one you're talking about, where he is disguised as some kind of commissioner, and he's trying to test the Legion so they won't give up their secrets. And it all starts with, again, Mon-El, Superboy, and Ultra Boy trying to form a wedge to break the Iron Curtain of Time. And there's the Time Trapper again in a shadowy cameo. And he goes, you superheroes can't pass through the time barrier, but I can. And I'm coming back to your time to destroy the Legion. Again, no reason. Just like our miniseries. Now, in this appearance, though, he's wearing a brown hood. And as you said, he tries to find out the secret of the concentrator. And at the end, they come up with a new part of their code where they say, we will prepare to conquer the Time Trapper, even if it means our lives. We vow never to rest until we've penetrated the Iron Curtain of Time and brought this super criminal to justice. So again, it's a story that Edmund Hamilton is building.
And isn't this great? Because when I think most of us, when we think of the Silver Age, it's pretty much done in one stories, right? There's no continuity and whatnot. And yet what Hamilton has done is he's recycled this character from a story from almost 20. No, wait, you said 36, almost 30 years earlier, and he's just kind of tossing in the name or showing a one panel thing of them trying to pierce this barrier, and this goes on for several issues.
Oh yeah, and in the very next appearance, so this is Adventure Comics 322. Time Trapper doesn't appear in this issue. This is the Super Pets issue where they're testing Prody to be a member of the Super Pets, and it's all because the team is working on weapons to break the Iron Curtain of Time. And Saturn Girl suspects that they're being watched by the Time Trapper, and there's this like electronic eye floating around. And that's the backdrop to the Super Pet story. And again, written by Edmund Hamilton, and this is July of 64. So when people say that Stan Lee created continuity, that's not true. He created, it's just not. He created the continuity that we might come to know, or he created Marvel, the style of continuity that Marvel used, but there was continuity in other comics. It just wasn't the continuity that we knew. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I even wrote that here for this appearance. So then we go to Adventure Comics 329. Now this is Jerry Siegel writing, and we get the Bizarro Legion, which I never knew there was a Bizarro Legion. So weird. And again, Superboy, Ultra Boy, and Mon-El, once again, trying to break the Iron Curtain of Time. And the Time Trapper says they'll never guess the sinister reason for this barrier. And you know what? I don't think we ever will.
Yeah.
Adventure Comics 338. We get a cover blurb with the character's name, the showdown with the Time Trapper everyone is waiting for. And this is the issue where he is finally in his purple robes. A Jerry Siegel story, The Menace of the Sinister Super Babies. It's terrible. The caption even says, the greatest foe of the Legion of Superheroes is the Time Trapper. What? Is it really? A nefarious ultra-scientific criminal who has escaped justice by hiding into the far future behind an impenetrable Iron Curtain of Time. The Legion has sworn to defeat this emissary of evil. Now he has a whole bunch of dumb henchmen in here. It's the first and only pre-crisis appearance of Glorith, who we will come to know later. It is a full Time Trapper story, which is kind of great for once. This is the issue where we get his city that looks like it's a Black Panther. Um, he has an hourglass that he uses. He has this de-evolution sand that turns everybody into babies. It's really stupid. By the end, the curtain is gone. They've imprisoned the Time Trapper in the 30th century in a spaceship surrounded by a force field, and they just leave him on some planet and just go away. So it's like, it's the Legion's fault why he keeps coming back. Really. Then we cut to... He has a little cameo in Adventure Comics 363, but that's incidental. We go to this weird trilogy in Action Comics 385 through 387 in 1970 by Cary Bates, called it's called Superman's Time Odyssey, where the American government is working on this like time thing. So they tell Superman, you can't travel to the future for 24 hours because it's going to mess up our experiment. So he's like, all right. Oh, I get a message from the future. I'll use a broken Legion time bubble to go to the future because that won't do anything. And he goes to the future, but when he tries to go back to the past, he bounces off a temporal force barrier placed by the Time Trapper. And we get to see the Time Trapper. He's just like, again, in the shadows. And all throughout these 3 issues, it's basically the Time Trapper just sending Superman to various parts of the, future. And it's just weird because, again, it has no ending. Superman goes so far into the future that he winds up back where he started. Just like actually the short story that Edmund Hamilton wrote, where that character gets so bored with life that at the end of that story, he basically puts the Earth through a whole new birth cycle. And then it goes to like the polar age, and then it goes to like, modern civilization while he's sleeping. And when he wakes up at the end of time, and he sees another character there sitting at a table, and it's him. And the other character dies, and he's like, oh, I'm here at the end. And there he is. He's at the end of time again. So this is also like one of those cyclical stories. It's very crazy. But it's a Time Trapper story. Superman 295 in 1976. There's no appearance of the Time Trapper, but there's another mention of the Time Trapper in the future messing around with time, and one of these Green Lanterns from the future has to come back and impersonate himself as Father Time so he can get Superman to restore futures, because apparently Time Trapper had destroyed a whole bunch of futures that would have created the Legion of Superheroes. There's some commandy stuff in it. It's so crazy, so crazy, so crazy. Okay. See, I told you, this is a lot. Then we get to some stories that you might have read from 1977. Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes 223. It's the first time we get the Time Trapper on a cover. It's written by Jim Shooter. And the Time Trapper captures 5 Legionnaires. This is going to sound familiar. Because if he gets rid of these 5 Legionnaires, he believes that he can finally take over everything. And the 5 Legionnaires are Sunboy, Karate Kid, Chameleon Boy, Superboy, and Saturn Girl. He battles them individually, but yet at the same time, Superboy punches his hourglass that's on his belt. And it looks like by the end that the Time Trapper gets zapped away into this doorway to a red sun. And he should be dead, but obviously he's not. Then we go to 1978, March of 1978. This is all new collector's edition, the Legion of Superheroes issue. Paul Levitz, Mike Grell. This is the wedding of Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad. And it all takes place in an alternate universe. Superboy travels to the future, and it's not the future that he knows because there's like this, weird stuff going on in the future where nobody knows who he is, and the Legionnaires are kind of like crazy bad or whatever. Nobody knows him, and they go back in time, and it's a plot by the Time Trapper to try to mess things up. And when they finally figure out what they're going to, who it is and what they're going to do, they go to the end of time, and we find out that this time trapper is a controller, as you mentioned. And he says here, this controller was the first of the controllers to be exiled for proposing conquest of the universe. The controller that made the Sun Eater that killed Ferrolad was one of this controller's followers. He wanted to conquer all dimensions, and that's why he steals the miracle machine from the Legion headquarters. And eventually, this time trapper is defeated, and they send him to the controller universe. Time is restored, and they hope that the other controllers will take care of him. So that's where we get the controller thing. We get another weird tangent. Super Friends, issue 17 and 18. These are stories written by E. Nelson Bridwell, where he references the wedding issue I just talked about. Superman says, that's the last time we heard of this time trapper, he was a controller. We even reference that Wonder Woman story from way back, where Wonder Woman looks at Time Trapper and goes, oh, well, he was called the Time Master when I dealt with him. So here's this out-of-continuity DC comic dealing with continuity. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's terrible, but it's brilliant. And again, it's one of those stories where he just sends all the characters to different points in time. And at the end, he's stopped by Gleek, and Superman contacts the controllers, and they teleport him away. Then we go to Legion of Superheroes 280, 281, and 282.
See, now this is I forgot about these. This is the story that I think I first read the Time Trapper.
Because if that's your, this is right around when you first started reading.
Yeah.
This is the aftermath of the Reflecto storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of wraps it up, and it's by Roy Thomas, and then one of the later issues is Roy Thomas with Paul Levitz doing the dialogue. This is like the explanation of what actually happened, the time trappers involved. It has to do with that hypnotic suggestion in Superboy's mind that Saturn Girl put there to never go to the future, because then he would know about his parents' death. And the time trapper sends a whole bunch of people back to Superboy's time because he feels if he divides them, he'll be able to attack the 30th century, but he never does. And by the end of the 3 issues, because we never actually get a confrontation with him until the 3rd issue, the Legionnaires manage to go around the Iron Curtain of Time through Phantom Girl's dimension. Oh, just that easy. And they defeat the Time Trapper in 5 to 6 panels. Saturn Girl even says, one of our most dangerous foes defeated that easily? And again, I have to ask, is he really? Is he really one of the most dangerous foes? They barely encounter him.
Yeah, you would think somebody who can easily travel through time and pull people out of time and do his bidding and whatnot would be a little more dangerous.
Right. This is also the story that connects the Molecule Master to the Time Trapper. From way back from Superboy and the Legion 201, we find out that the whole reason why the Molecule Master was going after the Legion was because he was created by the Time Trapper. So that's a little bit of a retcon there, typical Roy Thomas fashion. Then we go to Legion of Superheroes 291, as you mentioned, the second part of the Great Darkness saga, where the Trapper is imprisoned in Takron Galtos, and they reference Legion of Superheroes 283 in that story. He gets his power taken away. And then we see the Time Trapper in one panel in Crisis on Infinite Earths number 10, as the Spectre is talking to all the characters, all the DC Universe, that the Anti-Monitor is going back in time to the beginning of time, so they all have to band together and stop him, but we just get one little appearance. And that leads us, finally, to Legionnaires number 3, where we discover that at least the Time Trapper that was a controller was actually just masquerading for the real Time Trapper that we're meeting in this
Yeah.
miniseries.
And for his amusement.
Right?
Not necessarily for some sort of great plot or uh, whatever his motivations were, but I think he actually says something about he was the controller version of himself was there for his amusement, which to me that helped elevate the time trapper to be like this more menacing character.
And it really goes back to that original story because there was some element of that in that short story about here is a man at the end of time that has nothing to do. He gains random powers and he's like, no, I have to do something, right? Because all he does is live at the end of time. Um, that's total headcanon stuff for me. But when I read about this miniseries, and when he's coming up with a game and it has no real ending, yeah, I very unfairly go, yeah, because that's what that character did in that short story.
Yeah.
He tried things. He was just trying things, and when you're the last man on Earth, what the hell else are you supposed to do?
So yeah, I guess I can buy that a little better now because if all you live for is some sort of stimulation, then you're just going to do whatever comes to your mind to try and assuage whatever emptiness you're trying to fill, right? So maybe it can come across as a bit schizophrenic, and which is how I kind of interpreted the way he was interrogating Garth and trying to break him down, because he would vacillate from just trying to talk Garth into madness to physically attacking Garth and trying to choke him to death, to then showing him some traumatic things that actually happened, his parents' death, for example. So yeah, it's just like, pick a path, dude, but he doesn't have to. He has all the time in the world to mess around like this. It doesn't really matter to him one way or the other if he not thinking maybe he doesn't even care if he succeeds at this point. He's just doing something just to stave off the boredom.
Yeah, I think that's a very real argument that you could make about this character who consistently doesn't have any reason to fight the Legion other than he wants to fight the Legion.
So why do you think then that, I mean, obviously things have progressed over time, different writers and artists' interpretations of the character, but in terms of, in character, why does he constantly talk about defeating the Legion to take over the world or the universe or whatever? Wouldn't it just be better for us to know, like we see here, that's intimated very heavily at the end of issue 4, that all he's trying to do is just play a game, and the Legionnaires and the universe, well, the Legionnaires are his pawns and the universe is his chessboard. Do you think that would explain better, provide some sort of concrete motivation for the time trapper for you?
I do think it has to do with the fact that, and I'm trying to look up where it says, I think it's in the miniseries, but it might be in my larger Trapper notes, where the Legion they're kind of like an anomaly to his history, to his being, right? Like if you are someone who if you're there at the end of time and you can try to learn about the history and there is this ultimate destiny for the Legion, whether it's he believes it has to do with him or maybe it really does have to do with him, I think it's a way, it's the writerly way to actually build up the Legion. So if you have this character that technically has already won, he is the last man on Earth, right? He lives at the end of time. He's won. Why does he even have to go back?
Yeah.
I feel like that is more of the, maybe it could be the writer saying, because the Legion is that amazing, that if he doesn't do something about them, they will do something about him. And that's in their frickin' code. If you go back to that one Silver Age issue, they're like, we won't rest, So I think it maybe is, if I have to think of it maybe in writer terms, is it that? I don't know. Because none of his stories pan out. None of his stories before this pan out. None of the stories after it pan out. He's a games man. That's it. Well, and those are the worst villains.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean,
frustrating.
This explains away all the different takes of this character, not just in the terms, or not just in terms of him using other people as stand-ins, but just the different apparent motivations or machinations that he's employed and tried to execute, because. Today he's going to do this. And 6 months from now, he's going to do that just because he can. And he's motivated by just wanting to do something.
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is. He just wants to do something.
And I don't know.
Oh my God. Wait, Peter, he's suffering from quarantinitis.
This is the perfect miniseries to read right now. You're right. Some days I use my powers for good. Other days I use my powers for bad. I am the time trapper. I'm going to start wearing purple robes and walk around my apartment and stare out windows.
Oh, jeez.
I love it.
Please don't do that.
Yeah, and all those appearances, I couldn't tell you which one was the real time trapper, which one. I sort of think all of them were not real. Maybe the image behind the time barrier could be the real time trapper, but I like to think that every single physical appearance of the time trapper up to this point was a masquerade.
Yeah,
that could be kind of fun.
Yeah, that's how I take it.
Yeah. And who's to say? Look, okay, I said not to talk about after this, but it still goes on even after it. We don't know who he is. We learn one thing, then we learn another thing.
Yes.
So it's like, it's his shtick. It really is just the shtick of the character. All right, so I've talked a lot about the Time Trapper. We've probably talked way more than we should about the miniseries, but let's just do, you take charge of this. It's just some quick thoughts. Let's do quick thoughts.
Okay, so let's see here. I just had a bunch of little things from, I think, each issue.
Okay.
So let me find those. Oh, well, I'll start off with, it reminds me a lot of this whole idea that I'm going to talk about Time Trapper more, but it kind of reminds me of how, oh my gosh, who created Thanos? Who was one of the co-creators of Thanos?
Jim Starlin.
Starlin, yes. How so Starlin famously will, in the comics in which he is creating a story around Thanos, if he doesn't like something that somebody else did in the Marvel Universe with Thanos, it always comes down to, well, that was just Thanos employing a stand-in, and the real Thanos gets rid of him. So it's like Starlin is totally just dismissing whatever somebody else did to his character. So I kind of see some connections there with what Giffen is doing with the Trapper here. So I thought that was just kind of fun. Oh, okay. So I just want to bring this or ask you. I mentioned it in the synopsis, but Aunt Imra, what the hell was that all about?
I think that's Giffen just trying to put humor, just like Otak.
Sure. But
he loves those zany. I think it's also a reason why they include Ayla and Block, to try to just make sure we know that these they're not an isolated universe. They're part of a larger thing. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of Ayla, that was one of the things I wanted to bring up too. Was it's like, okay, yeah, Ayla's the sister, so yeah, you get some sort of sitcom-y type humor with her trying. She wants to come over. She's supposed to babysit or something. I don't remember which, but They have to avoid her. She's like, but I think something weird's going on, so I'm going to go check it out. And then she runs into Aunt Imra, who talks with no pausing for, I only can imagine, for hours. That woman would drive me crazy. But what's really interesting about Ayla's appearance there is, yes, like you said, it's also to remind us that there's the larger connection here. But there's that scene in issue 4 where Ayla, a construct of Ayla, is torturing Lightning Lad by siding with their evil brother, Lightning Lord. I'm forgetting his real name.
Mecht.
That's right. And so I thought that was really cool because Ayla and Garth are the twins. Mecht has always been the odd man out, and yet in this scene, Ayla is choosing Mecht over her twin, which I thought was a great, probably the most effective thing that Time Trapper tried to do, aside from kidnapping his son. But the whole internal mind trickery stuff that Trapper's doing, I thought that was the more interesting scene out of all of them. So I like that. We didn't even talk about Rond. Oh, that scene with Ron Vidar and the Legionnaires in issue 2, the Legionnaires stealing the time cube. And I thought that was really interesting because, desperate times lead to desperate measures, right? But these are the hallmarks of Legionnairedom. They are the stalwart representation of what the Legion is, and yet here they are deceiving their friend, and then once they can't recruit him, knock him out and steal the time cube to try and go to the Time Trapper. And Cosmic Boy even I guess kind of jokes about maybe they should now apply for a membership in the Legion of Supervillains. But and all that happens and they all get returned to their destroyed apartment, but they still committed a crime. What's going to happen now? So it's little things like that are thrown in this miniseries where it's like, okay, there's a lot of these loose threads that are just kind of dangling out there, and are we going to get some sort of resolution? Or I kind of feel like we're not, which frustrates me. But I'm hoping we do. Oh, you mentioned Otak. There's another annoying character, and annoying in this way. I noticed that not only does Otak, but other characters, other minions of the Time Trapper, they constantly stutter with not even in conversation with the Trapper himself, but with Otak does this with Rock and Imra, and I just have to say that just annoyed the heck out of me. Because unless you have a stutter, not everybody does that, even in fear. And I guess I don't know. It seems weird. They're just trying to show that the Time Trapper is so scary that he's got people stuttering in fear constantly, even when he's not around. Okay, I guess. I feel like I'm just complaining about things now, but. We talked. You talked a little bit about the progression in issue 4 with Garth. I like how we get basically a progression. So early on in the issue, it's just Garth he's being annoyed by these things that are happening to him, but that annoyance turns into anger, turns into fear. I like that progression. It's not a clear progression. It's not doesn't always lead for or go from one element or one scene to the next in a very clear fashion. But it's there. It's all, again, a jumbled mess. But it makes sense that the Trapper is ramping up what he's trying to do to Garth, even if we don't really fully understand why. And then I guess the last thing, Peter, I'm gonna throw out there to you. Uh, do you think this what Trapper's trying to do to Garth, break him down to gain some knowledge or whatever, and the idea that you talked about too, that Garth is the weak one, all this stuff that's happened to Garth and whatnot. Do you think that this is, and I'm jumping the timeline here, so forgive me. Do you think this is where the idea for who Garth turns out to be in, I think it was 5 years later, that they revealed this? I don't want to say exactly, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think that's where this kind of that idea started in the back of Giffen's mind, perhaps?
I don't know, because I'd have to see whose idea that really was. Was it Giffen? Was it
that's
the
true.
beer bombs?
Yeah.
Was it
But
speculation?
But either way, I just maybe this is where that I don't know why I think that exactly, but other than the fact that Garth is always what's that he's got feet of clay. That's the phrase that I was searching for. He's always the guy that has the feet of clay. And so I wonder if that's where that came from. So anyway,
I think there's even some stuff headcanon wise that you could make an argument about one of the time trappers' later identities. You could even bring it all the way back to here, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, so. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to get into that or not.
No,
we'll that's
it, 50 years from now when we get there, we'll talk about it.
Because that blew my mind when I read that. So yeah, and trying to figure out, because that's a lot of issues that I read in the interim when I was reading the Legion comics back then, and up to that point that you're talking about, and now throwing this in there, Legionnaires 3 into the mix. It's like I don't remember exactly what went on in those intervening issues in those years, but man, it's that now I really want to go and kind of read through the progression to that point to see if there's any kind of real connections there.
I think let's wrap up. I'm just going to put out some Ernie Cologne stuff. First of all, the artwork is so interesting when he uses different points of lighting. There's a lot of lighting that's coming from behind some of the characters. There's a lot of lighting that's coming from underneath their faces. So we get some real interesting shadow work that people might not be used to as they're looking at this.
Yes.
Ernie Cologne has his very own unique style that I think is on display here. A couple uses of some 9-panel grids before Watchmen, but Watchmen wasn't the first one that ever used it. Some interesting shots that I don't know if this is their intention, but like page 7 of issue 3, when Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl are running through the headquarters and they come up on this crazy hallway that looks like it's just showing just craziness, like time or whatever. It almost looks like it's the Time Trapper's hood, but instead of being purple on the outside and black on the face, it's black on the outside and then this time craziness on the inside. So there's a couple other pages too where it feels like the Time Trapper's hood is kind of like, is that what it is? Like even at the end of issue 1 on one of the, I think it's page 22, when they're looking at Graham's crib, almost looks like the silhouette of the hood is there. So, and I don't doubt that Ernie Cologne had that in mind, because he's a pretty creative artist that way. And just some really interesting, I thought the splash pages were used nicely. That close-up of Lightning Lad's face on page 1 of issue 4 is kind of crazy. So we didn't talk a lot about the art, but I just wanted to point those things out.
Well, and since we are talking about that, I want to point out issue 3. So, the page 1, it opens with this bird's eye view of Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl in their cell, and you got the kind of the surrounding building material, and this I think it's a force field or something. But Cologne, to me, he likes to use lines to evoke shading a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have to say he doesn't use that a whole lot in here. So it's a different, we have a different inker than I was going to say than I think that I've seen used before on his work, but I don't know if that's true. But there's definitely a difference in style here that he's employing. But then you see these like this first couple pages where the lines of Cologne's work that I'm used to seeing, I see here, but used in a different way. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I too noticed the shading in this series. I noticed there's lots of black areas, mostly in Trapper's, his shaded face. We never actually see the Trapper's face. And then you contrast that with like the brightness of the Legionnaires' costume and their, kind of their world. I like that dichotomy between the light and the dark. And you mentioned on the covers, where Trapper is looming larger and larger, and with his purple robes and his black face. But then we get that fourth issue with the white, and there's a page in here where this is after that scene I talked about with Ayla and Mecht, where it looks like Garth has reached his breaking point, and that whole half page is just him in the middle. Mumbling, but he's surrounded in this large area of white, and then when it goes to a different scene, but when we come back to Lightning Lad and the Trapper, the backgrounds are all white. I thought that was really cool.
It's a nice callback. So those are our thoughts. I think we mined the heck out of something that we, maybe thought, well, it was 4 issues, though.
Yeah.
So kind of makes sense. Well, that's pretty good. 4 issues in 2 hours, where we normally only talk about 1 issue in 2 hours. So
see, we could do that. We could probably do more issues in that amount of time. But right. Oh well. I if you don't mind, Peter, I had a few quotes here from Mindy Newell from the interview in Legion Companion.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about it a little bit already. But I just wanted to say here, she says, you know what I'm really proud of? Legionnaires 3. That was a really fun story to write. To me, that was a real space opera because it had everything. It had family crisis and mega villainy and mega threat. And for some reason, I just loved running Lightning Lad through the ringer. So there you go. That's why they decided to do it. The poor boy, it all started when he lost his arm. Ever since, he never really got back... Excuse me. He never really got back his balls. She a little bit later in the interview, she says, I did love beating up on poor Garth. He's like a schnook, when you want to hit a wimp and say, stop being such a wimp, that kind of thing. I thought that was funny.
And we would be remiss. We should read I want to read a couple things from Charlton Hero. Chris, he emailed us about this miniseries. Just a couple points here. He likes the callbacks. This series, through the actions of the enemy, we revisited many old parts of Legion history, seeing the old clubhouse, past adventures, characters, seeing the Legion of supervillains, Starfinger. They respected the source material and came up with fun ways to showcase Legion history. He also mentions, I love that we got to see Cosmic Boy actually search how he feels. He is the odd man out a little, and just maybe feels he missed some opportunity with Saturn Girl. I always felt they never explored Cosmic Boy's feelings about Imra enough. I actually felt bad for the guy and wanted him to make his move. He says here, I loved the series back in the day, and it actually meant more to me on the reread. I had fun reading my favorite characters coming out of retirement and fighting a major foe, even briefly. One of my headcanon ideas back in the day was that the reality that Lightning Lad was replaced in the timeline by an imposter living his life as he remained a hostage of the Time Trapper,
Ooh.
forced to watch someone else live his life. I always thought it would be really cool one day for the current Legion to find Garth, who was still under the spell of the Trapper, and to find out that they have been infiltrated by an imposter all this time. This, of course, would lead to one more round with the Trapper.
See, that might have been a more interesting replacement story. That's not the right. than what we
got.
Yeah, yeah. But then we missed out on. We would have missed out potentially on some interesting character growth with Shrinking Violet.
Yeah.
Speaking of feedback, I put the call out on Twitter.
Yep.
The weekend before we were going to record, and I got some nice feedback from some people. I just wanted to make mention of that. First of all, the Legion of Substitute Podcasters reminded me by responding that they have a series of episodes dedicated to this miniseries, so people can go check that out. They starting with episode 543 if they want to get a different perspective, I suppose, on the miniseries. Sean from the Secret Wars and Beyond podcast said, I read the miniseries when it came out and really enjoyed it. The three founders had retired before I came to the Legion, so it gave me a chance to know them, which is interesting because I had been reading these characters for a while, obviously for many years before I got to this miniseries. So it's always, I'm always interested in when people get introduced to X, whatever it happens to be, and compare it to my experience. So everybody's comic is their first, or everybody's story, this kind of story is their first. So I like that concept. But Sean also says, it cemented the Time Trapper as a big bad. Up through his appearance in issue 4 of the 5-year later run, he's my favorite Legion villain, and his presence signals a major battle. Knucklehead says, I bought and read the miniseries when it first came out. I was always a Legion fan and loved the relationship between the Legion founders. Quite enjoyed it. Let's see here. Garth was always the hard luck Legionnaire, and the miniseries played with that. I enjoyed the stories where Rock, Imra, and Garth had the spotlight to themselves. They deserved it. Oh, I'll end with this. Canadian Geek said, this is, honest to God, the first time I've ever known of this series' existence. I want to read it now. So there you go.
Now, in one of the letter columns, Mindy Newell teased that, hoped that they could continue this type of miniseries with 3 different other characters. Did you give any thought to who you might want to see?
Oh, man. There's so many to pick from.
Right. Can I offer 2 choices? Okay. My first choice would be Block, Invisible Kid, and White Witch, the last 3 new members before the Baxter run. I think that could be kind of fun.
Yeah.
All right, and I'm really proud of this next one. Ready? Tyrock, Polar Boy, and Sun Boy.
Ooh, interesting.
And you would call it...
Oh, gosh.
A Song of Ice and Fire.
That is perfect.
Come on, that's brilliant, right?
That is great. So wait, did you come up with the title first and then the characters, or were you thinking about the characters?
No, I just really would like to see the newbies together.
Oh, okay.
Because they don't get to do anything. White Witch gets to do stuff. Block and Invisible don't.
Yeah, that's true.
The other one was just me being silly, as normal.
But it is too bad that they didn't do some more of that, or they couldn't do more of that, because what a great way to explore these other characters more.
Yeah, I think because we get the Cosmic Boy miniseries, they just funneled their energies that way. Because that's the next miniseries that we get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's actually a good segue, because our future Tales episodes, as we said, this was episode number 5. Our next Tales episode will come out in about another 5 episodes of the regular Legion Project podcast. We're going to do Legion of Superheroes Baxter Annual number 2. So that's the continuation of the Curse Annual that we read in one of our regular Legion issues episodes. Some other possible future Tales episodes might include, obviously, the Cosmic Boy miniseries. That'll eventually be coming, probably this year sometime. And then we did talk about maybe doing the first 6 issues of Brian Michael Bendis and Ryan Sook's Legion of Superheroes, the current series.
Mm-hmm. I imagine it'll be similar to the format we did here.
Yeah, just talk general thoughts. General thoughts. So let us know what you thought of this. We probably squeezed out more time than we realized we thought we were going to do for this episode.
And I did not get through all the notes that I made for this too. So
neither did I. But I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, we always have our websites that we could always dump the rest of our notes on there. I'm sure people would love to see some of the other stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, if somebody really wants that, I will throw those out there. Just let us know.
And they can reach me at peter@thedailyrios.com.
And you can reach me at longboxreview@gmail.com.
Cool. This was fun.
Yeah.
Always like talking about the tales, these little one-offs here and there. It's kind of fun. Any other thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Then we're going to wrap it up here. And we will come back with, we are on, issue 23 of the regular Legion run. So whenever we record next, that'll be our next Legion episode. And we're going to wind up the Who is Sensa Girl mystery in another couple issues. So.
Yes. Another thing I'm looking forward to, and I hope I'm not disappointed like this.
Oh, good thoughts. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Shh. That'll be soon. 23, 24, 25, 26. I think we got 3-4 more issues. So, all right. So that's it. That's it for this episode. Please, by all means, go let us know what you think. Send us an email or let us know by Twitter. And we hope everybody's being safe.
Yes.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.